On February 3rd, 1980, my mom was born in a small village called Chiang Mai in Thailand. She is the oldest of 6 children. When she was about 4 years old, my grandparents decided that they wanted to immigrate to the US in order to live a better lifestyle and be able to provide better care for their family. This is their story. Because my mom's family lived in a further village, they had to travel from one village to another in order to get closer to the river. Once arriving to the village closest to the river, they started their journey where they swam in the water for several days. After swimming in the water for several days, they eventually made it to a transportation service where they rode in the back of a truck for many more days in order to get to the nearest airport. Once they got to the airport, they got on a plane and made their first stop in the US in San Diego, California. On April 5th, 1980, my dad was born in a village called Suthep in Thailand. He was one of 10 children. When he was about 3 years old, my grandparents wanted to move to the US for better opportunities for their family and to see if they would be better off in a new and different country. Like my mom's family, my dad's family also traveled through the river, but they lived in the village right next to the river. So they started their journey and traveled many days on a boat. Eventually, they also made it to a transportation service where they rode in the back of a truck for another several days in order to get to the nearest airport. They took a plane and flew to the US, and like my mom's family, my dad's family's first stop in the US was San Diego, California. Even though my mom and dad came to the US at different times, they both ended up moving to Fresno, where they met each other. Eventually, they got married, and then they had me, my sister Emily, my sister Caitlin, and my brother Logan. Thank you to my parents for sacrificing so much for me.
My mom was born in the oh-so-great country of India. She was born in the state of Punjab. She was the youngest out of 4 kids. She had 2 older sisters, she has 2 older sisters and 1 older brother. Growing up, my mom didn't really, socialize as much because the only time she would socialize would be at school. Usually she would just, do some farm work, or help out with the house, but yeah, in high school, usually went up to 10th grade. So after 10th grade, my mom didn't really get to go to college because she had to stay home. Yeah, that's the home. One more door. Yeah, that's the home. She would do housework, help her mom, my grandma out with stuff, or help with her brother's kids, nephews, and worked on the farm. So she didn't really have time to go to college because a good college would be miles away, and my parents just didn't want to do that. But as she grew older, about around 30, she was like, I wouldn't want to stay in this type of environment for the rest of my life. She wanted a better future for her future kids. Plus, she was 30. So if you're 30 and single and a woman in India, people used to judge you a lot for that. So she was like, you know what? It's time to move on to bigger things. So she decided that she would go to America and try to live with, would live with her sister and her husband in San Francisco. Getting to USA was the exciting part, but leaving everything behind in India was one of the worst things my mom had to experience because she was sad. She was leaving her whole life behind. She was leaving her parents behind, her little nephews, her other sister, and her brother. It was very sad, but she was ready to move on. So, my mom went from Punjab all the way to San Francisco, California to be with her sister and her husband. She went on a plane. No. She went on a plane. Oh my god, no. She went on a plane. She went on a plane, basically, to come here. That's where for a few months, her sister and her did touristy things, didn't really have a job because it was hard finding a job then. So while her husband was working, they just did housework, the usual. But then her sister's husband got a job in Fresno. So they packed their bags and they moved to Fresno. That's how my mom started working as a nurse, and yeah, that job. But my dad's story is completely different. He was also born in Punjab, and he was the youngest out of 8 kids. So 4 older sisters and 3 older brothers. Yeah, he was the youngest. Like my mom, he spent most of his time in school too and at farms, but he didn't finish high school like my mom did. Halfway through 10th grade, which is senior year here, he just decided, yeah, no. So he was like, you know what, I'm not even going to get a diploma, but you know what, I guess that's fine. Not really, but So around 27 years old, he decided that he wanted to have a better future too, get a good job. And he was 28 and not married either, but men aren't judged that often as much as women are, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, so he decided that since his 2 older brothers lived in England, he was like, he should venture out to USA, bigger the better. So him and his 3 friends got together and they decided that they were going to travel to America. But tickets are very, very expensive. So what happened was they tried to drive to different areas for, jobs. So they just drove. So their first stop was Romania. Romania, they had a good job in factories, but at a certain point it didn't really end well because one of his friends shoplifted in a store for some food. I don't know, they ended up in jail, so after they were released, they moved on. They moved on to England, because that is where his 2 brothers were living. So they stayed with his 2 brothers, the group of friends. They got a job in a factory there too, but after a while they're like, okay, we gotta pick up the pace, so they decided to drive to Germany. Well, drive, then ship to Germany, And then that's where they gained most of their money for tickets. So they got their tickets and they flew all the way from Germany to Fresno, not to Fresno, to America, but resided in Fresno, California. But in between that, they had to stop at NYC. So they stayed there for a few months, but it was not the best trip because even though it was really hard to come here, it would have been harder to go back to India. So even when hard times came, because his parents died while he was in America, he couldn't go back because it would have been much tougher. So it would have been more tough. So basically, he had to stay there and not get to see his parents or go to their funeral. So it was very sad. But, life goes on. So then, as now my parents are both in India, they had mutual friends, so they introduced each other. And then my mom's parents, they got the idea of, wow, they're both single, they can get married. There you go. That's the great love story. So then, after they got married, they had us, and then 6-7 years later, they both got citizenships, finally, to America. This just shows how long and difficult it can be to get a citizenship. Thank you for listening to their story.
In 1963, my dad was born along with 3 siblings in a town called Nisun in Singapore. In 1965, my mom was born along with 3 siblings as well in Woodland, Singapore. In 1988, my mom met my dad through my mom's brother, and in 1995, they both got married. My dad and my grandpa went on a trip to America, and when they moved back to Singapore, my mom and dad decided to move to America in 1996. They both made this decision because the United States had more opportunities to open businesses. Even though leaving their family was difficult, they both knew the benefits that they would experience from moving to America, so they hopped on a plane to LAX. In 1997, they had my sister, Amelia, and in 2001, they had me, the love of their life. After a long process, my parents were granted citizenship in 2002 to the United States. In 2003, they decided to move from LA to Fresno, and in 2004, they opened up their own trucking business called Gill Enterprise. After 15 years, they're still running this company today. Thank you for listening to their immigration story, and thank you to my parents for making this decision and providing me with this opportunity.